But it so happened that one day there was a woman on my exam table, and I never forget this day, because she was sitting there and she just said, "Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart." And so this just the day I just asked her a curious question. I said, "Well, what does falling apart actually mean to you?" And sadly, like a lot of doctors, I'm looking at the list trying to figure out which one I'm going to address, right? How am I going to manage this? What do I need to do today? And there was a long pause. And she said, my marriage is falling apart because my husband is just so tired taking care of me. Now there's like silence in the room, and I've stopped thinking about the past medical history list. And then she said, "I can't travel to Washington to see my grandkids. I can't be on an airplane for 3 hours. I can't attend church. I don't have any friends. I'm depressed. And we're facing financial bankruptcy because of the cost of my healthcare." And then she said, with tears running down her cheeks, she said, "Can you help me?" And in that moment, several things start running through your mind. One is, I have no idea how to help her. I don't know where these diseases are coming from. I don't know if they can be stopped or reversed. Now I recognize that everything that I'm seeing on her past medical history list is really eroding her quality of life, the things that are really most meaningful. It's not that her lab values get better or that, we can cross a diagnosis off of her list, but her quality of life, like relationships, meaning, purpose, everything is eroded because of this list. And so I walked out of the room and I just said, what am I going to do the next time to help somebody, restore their quality of life? Is it possible?
As a vegan, do you ever feel like you're living in a parallel universe, aware of things that many others don't even seem to notice, let alone acknowledge? I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse podcast. We talk with vegans from around the globe who, like you, are living lives of integrity and compassion with an eye toward justice. Through their personal stories, you'll come to see that you're not an outlier. In fact, you're part of an entire posse of individuals who aren't just keeping the peace, they're creating it through their food choices and beyond. You won't be saddling up, but you're in for the ride of your life. Welcome to the Vegan Posse. Hey Posse, I'm Chrissy Benson, host of the Vegan Posse. I've got some very exciting things to report here from Nashville, Tennessee. First, if you'd like to be added to the Vegan Posse email list, which will be featuring news satire, membership options, and event updates, please contact me through my website, ChristineMelanieBenson.com, and mention that you're part of the posse. At that same website, you can also pick up a copy of my novel, Marrying Myself, the anti-romance romance featuring a vegan protagonist and a revolutionary self-love message. And make sure to check out the Marrying Myself playlist featuring amazing indie artists like Session Americana, Tom McBride, and many others. And on the subject of self-love, I'm absolutely thrilled to announce that I will be speaking at this year's Vegan Summer Fest, which takes place from July 10th to 14th in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. In case you're not familiar with Summerfest, it's the longest running vegan conference in the country, and this year marks its 50th anniversary. I am going to be giving 2 talks, one on self-love for vegans and one on normalizing veganism through the arts. So please come if you can. At last year's event, I got to hang out in person with several Vegan Posse fans, which was possibly the highlight for me. You can register for Vegan Summerfest at summerfest.navs-online.org. I'll also include that link in the show notes. And if you've got questions, feel free to email me at veganposse.email@gmail.com. And FYI, if you're not generally a fan of conferences, Summerfest is worth going for the food alone. And there's simply no substitute for being in an environment where being vegan is the norm and where you meet people even more radical about it than you. When you register, make sure to mention that you're part of the posse and are interested in hearing me speak so that they can schedule my talk at a time that works for everyone. Finally, the Vegan Posse Self-Love Series, the series dedicated to expanding our tenderness, compassion, curiosity, and sheer delight in one very important animal, ourselves, will be coming in June, so stay tuned. Turning to today's episode of the Vegan Posse, this episode marks the fourth and final episode in our Tennessee series, featuring amazing vegans in my neck of the woods here in Nashville, Tennessee. So how many doctors do you know who take it upon themselves to organize plant-based potluck dinners to help weave veganism into the fabric of community life? I happen to know of exactly one, and his name is Dr. Scott Stoll, whom I met at a very potluck dinner. All I can say is that if there were more doctors like Dr. Stoll, the world would be a very different and much better place. Fortunately, however, Dr. Stoll is helping create more doctors like him through his Plantrician Project. So without further ado, enjoy this conversation with Dr. Scott Stoll. Dr. Stoll, welcome to the Vegan Posse. Are you ready for the ride of your life?
I am. I'll put my seatbelt on. Thank you, Chrissy.
Good. That's the wise course of action. So I'm really happy to connect with you. As host of the Vegan Posse podcast, I've gotten the chance to talk with vegans from around the globe, which I love doing. But just as wonderful, if not even more so, is that despite all the stereotypes about Nashville and country music and hot chicken, there's a vibrant vegan movement right here in Tennessee. And not only do we have vegans here in the Nashville area, but we've got some really smart, committed, effective vegans working for the cause of animal liberation and human health. And you're one of them. So I'm really honored to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here and happy that we're both in Tennessee. That's wonderful.
Likewise. So to give people a little bit of background, you've done so many interesting and admirable things that it's really hard to know where to start. Among other things, you're co-founder of the Plantrician Project. You're a best-selling author. You've been on Dr. Oz's show and on PBS. And now you're on the Vegan Posse, meaning that you've reached a whole new level.
Right. That's right.
We won't specify whether that's a level up or down, but
No.
it's a new one. But why don't we start back at the very beginning? Why don't you tell us a little about where you're from and how you thought about food and health growing up, if you did at all?
Yeah, thanks. That's always a good place to start, isn't it? I grew up in Colorado, born and raised, little town outside of Fort Collins, Colorado called LaPorte. So I grew up on an acreage out in a little country town where there was really no town, just one street light and dirt roads. And so my dad grew up on a farm in Nebraska in the summer times. And so I grew up with a John Deere tractor in the garage and a big garden. And every spring I would hear the tractor fire up in the garage and I knew it was time to go out and get the ground ready for planting. So we had a big garden and we grew a lot of food. And so I always had an appreciation for growing food and harvesting food. I think I developed over the years a distaste for all the big baskets of beans my mom would bring in for me to snap. I was like, no, more beans. I can't take it anymore. But we always had really delicious, healthy food. So I think in that way, it was always woven into the culture of home. But at the same time, I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I grew up like a lot of people in the 70s and 80s where, we ate meat for dinner every night. There was some kind of meat on the plate. We had eggs. We grew up thinking milk was good for us. So we would actually go out to the farm and we got big jars of milk and I would drink milk because I thought it was building strong bones and a strong body. I didn't realize it was causing acne on my face and all kinds of other issues, bloating so I grew up in that way, and McDonald's was just growing for us. Like it was a treat to go out for fast food. Strangely,
right, for us too.
Like,
yeah,
we're going to McDonald's. Like, wow, we're going to McDonald's.
Yeah, I remember
Crazy
that.
thing. And And, my dad always had an interest in nutrition. So he had oat bran on the table and he would put oat bran in his orange juice in the morning. He learned that
That
sugar
sounds
wasn't
gross.
good. Yeah, I know. It was just, he had to spoon it out.
Oh my gosh.
We learned that sugar wasn't good, so we got rid of sugar in our house. And then trying to get rid of chocolate, we went to carob, and a carob chocolate cake is just not the same thing.
Not
No
the
matter,
same.
yeah. But there was always kind of an interest in nutrition. And I think it was woven into my DNA. That
Yeah.
food is
Is your
important.
father a doctor? Was he a doctor as
He
well?
was a teacher. He was a
Oh, a
teacher.
teacher. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And what about your mom? Was she interested in nutrition?
Not as much as my dad. My mom was a librarian at the school where I grew up. My dad
Mhm.
was, more interested in health and nutrition than my mom. My mom cooked healthy food,
Yeah.
really provided, an opportunity to always have some kind of vegetables on the plate and grow in the garden. But my dad was really the one that was more keenly interested in trying to make healthy choices. We had
Interesting.
chicken. I had my pet chickens and
Really?
their eggs but they were my friends. I liked my chickens. They would follow me around. Um,
Wow. But your family was not vegetarian or vegan, I'm
no, we
assuming.
didn't
So
even really think about that, right?
yeah, so did you eat other chickens?
We did, you don't, for some reason, I think that's the disconnect, right? That you have these pets that follow you around and you enjoy seeing them and talking to them, but somehow going in at night and eating the chicken, it was a total disconnect that was somehow the same, right?
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. Well, I've actually had a few guests, several guests on the show who had similar childhood experiences and were served their pet for dinner one night.
Oh my goodness,
Yeah,
that's dramatic.
yeah, yeah. So at least you never were served your pet chicken. Did your chicken have a name, or were there several?
Yeah, I had chickens and they had names um, you know, and I would go out and I would feed them every morning. They would follow me around and I loved my little chickens. We raised them from the
Yeah,
time they were little chicks. So
right. And so did you always want to be a doctor? When did that interest develop?
yeah, I loved science. My favorite book growing up, believe it or not, was The Athlete's Body. I just loved reading that book, junior high, high school. And I loved to try and understand what made us tick.
Huh.
Um,
I've never heard of
and
that book.
Oh,
That's
it's an
I
old,
have to come
I mean,
across.
it was just, it's nothing fancy. It's just an old book back in the 1980s, right? Quite a while ago
Yeah.
now. So I always had a fascination with that. I always wanted to know how things worked and why they worked. And even when I was a little boy, I was fishing. And when I caught a fish, I was more interested in just trying to understand like how the fish works, like what the gills were. And, I wouldn't, it's not great now, but I was dissecting the fish, just trying to I was fascinated by the physiology and the anatomy of this amazing living thing, right? It's just incredible. But again, there's a disconnect, right? The wonder of it all, but
Right.
still, killing it. But
Right.
so all the way through school, I just loved science. I was a little afraid, I think, when I went to college of the workload of becoming a physician, because I heard from friends. I didn't have any personal experience, but you hear from friends like medical school is really hard. And I love school, but I was nutritional science and biochemistry and undergraduate. And about my third year of med school, I was trying to think about what am I going to do when I graduate from med school. And looking at all the career choices, I thought, I really do want to be a doctor. And I'm willing to take on the workload to do it because that's the only pathway that I think would really be most fulfilling for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And was it as hard as you anticipated?
It's
Were
hard.
all the rumors
Yeah,
true?
it's hard.
Yeah.
But everything in life is hard, right? It's hard, but you love it. And so it's you can't imagine doing anything else, but it's I guess hard is always relative. Everything is there's always hard. It's people work hard. Everybody's busy to some extent. And, sometimes in med school, those days get longer than usual, especially when we're
Right.
on every other night.
Right.
But, it's if you love what you do and there's a vision for it, sure, it's hard, but it has meaning and purpose.
Right. So what sort of vision did you have for yourself as a medical doctor? And
Yeah,
has it changed?
it's, I think lots of people in their medical school interviews go in and they say the same thing, but it was really my heartfelt intent was I wanted to be a doctor because I really wanted to help people. I love the science. I was fascinated by the science, and I'm trying to understand how it works and why it works the way it does and how to make it better. But I really had compassion for people and I wanted to help them. And I thought that that was going into traditional medicine was the best way to help people.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that in a little bit. But that's really why I went into medicine. I was very passionate about the outcome of the process, which was seeing people healthier, happier, less pain, more beautiful lives.
Mm-hmm. Was there any particular disease or disorder that you had a special interest in, like cancer or heart disease?
Yeah, early in med school, I think just from a compassionate heart, I loved pediatric oncology. So I
Oh,
did a lot of work. We had a group of med students that put together a camp for children every year that had cancer. So we had a 1 week camp and had all the kids come, and we put together this really fun, beautiful camp for all the kids. And we had a buddy that we would be with during our entire medical school, a child that had cancer. I worked with a photographer during medical school that focused on children with cancer, and so just working, with those families. So it was always an interest of mine. But as I went along in medical school, and I started to see that, medicine helped the children, but it really didn't set them free. And so I decided not to pursue that avenue. I didn't love the science of the cancer treatments and oncology with chemotherapies, and it seems so destructive. And just from a kind of a big picture context, to me, it seemed like there's got to be a better way.
right,
There's
right.
got to be a better way.
Yeah, yeah. So when did you find that better way?
My fourth year of med school, it's always these we get to these crisis points like, okay, I'm in my fourth year of med school and I've got to decide on residency and what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And you start to run through the list of things. I really did love surgery. I loved the idea of surgery, but the lifestyle was so difficult. It's 5 years of every second or third night call. And this is before they had limitations on hours. So you could easily work, and I did in med school, 120 hours a week for 5 years. And, just thinking about quality of life, I was married at the time and had a son. And I was thinking, I don't want to miss the next 5 years of life to be a surgeon. And just balancing, values. And so I said, well, as much as I love that, I don't want to become a surgeon. So what else is there? In my fourth year of med school, somebody had mentioned the field of physical medicine and rehabilitation, which I'd never heard about in medicine. So it's an interesting field that has kind of two arms. One arm is dealing with patients and helping them that have had brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, amputations, major trauma. And then the other arm is musculoskeletal, sports medicine, spine.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love, being an athlete. I love the idea of working in that field and performance and helping people. So I chose the kind of musculoskeletal arm after residency. But it was a great fit for me because the theme in physical medicine rehabilitation is a little different than general medicine. It's really one of the quotes is that in our field is we're not looking to not only add years to people's lives, but life to people's years.
Mm.
Really focused on quality of life. It's a team-based approach to healthcare. It's a partnership with the patient.
Mm.
So it's very different than traditional medicine in that way. And I think because of that, it opens up your view a little bit more to look at outside the hard lines of medicine for treatments that enhance people's quality of life, which I think pre-sensitized me to start thinking about nutrition in a different way.
That makes so much sense. Right. That makes a lot of sense. So when did you take it to the next level? And when did you start discovering some of these principles about plant-based nutrition?
Yeah, so I was, like every good doctor, you finish your residency and you're proud of all the hard work and you think you've got a good foundation to start. So you go and you start practicing medicine. using, your diagnostic skills to make diagnoses and ordering imaging and medications and procedures. And, you're treating people and the disease symptoms get better. But then I kept hearing my patients tell me the same thing over and over. They would say, Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart. And it was just kind of a joke. They would talk about, it's lots of people say they're falling apart. You go to a family get together and Uncle Joe says he's falling apart. And, you assume that that's just what happens as you get older, that there's this inevitable consequence of aging where things break down and fall apart. And if you have bad genes, you get some of these diseases in the process, but that's why doctors are there to try and slow those things down. But it so happened that one day there was a woman on my exam table, and I never forget this day because she was sitting there and she just said, Dr. Stoll, can't you help me? I'm falling apart. And so the day I just asked her a curious question. I said, well, what does falling apart actually mean to you? And sadly, like a lot of doctors, I'm looking at the list, trying to figure out which one I'm going to address, right? How am I going to manage this? What do I need to do today? And there was a long pause. And she said, my marriage is falling apart because my husband is just so tired taking care of me. Now there's silence in the room, and I've stopped thinking about the past medical history list. And then she said, I can't travel to Washington to see my grandkids. I can't be on an airplane for 3 hours. I can't attend church. I don't have any friends. I'm depressed. And we're facing financial bankruptcy because of the cost of my healthcare. And then she said, with tears running down her cheeks, she said, can you help me? And in that moment, several things start running through your mind. One is, I have no idea how to help her. I don't know where these diseases are coming from. I don't know if they can be stopped or reversed. Now I recognize that everything that I'm seeing on her past medical history list is really eroding her quality of life, the things that are really most meaningful. It's not that her lab values get better or that, we can cross the diagnosis off of her list, but her quality of life, like relationships, meaning, purpose, everything is eroded because of this list. And so I walked out of the room and I just said, what am I going to do the next time to help somebody, restore their quality of life? Is it possible?
Right. What were her diseases? What was the
all the
cause
common
of her
ones,
visit?
all the
Right.
common diseases, type 2 diabetes, low back pain, knee arthritis, asthma, some high blood pressure, elevated cholesterol. The back pain was really severe and kind of debilitating for her. And, multiple medications for all of those, menopausal, osteoporotic, just like what so many people end up getting after age 65. That's most people, right?
Wow.
65 and beyond. And so she was like, I think that's what made me realize, she's just like so many people that I see every single day, and they're truly suffering. They're suffering at a different level than I think I understood, because you see the doctor, you put a smile on. Doctor puts a smile on and feels better because he did something, but then they go home and the suffering hasn't changed.
Right, right. So what year was this that you
2003.
2003. Wow.
Yeah.
So a little over 20 years ago. So where did you go from there?
So, once you start asking questions and looking for answers, it takes you down a whole nother road, especially in food, right?
Yeah.
So I started asking questions, and I got certified in age management medicine because that was kind of new at the time, and thinking about hormonal balance, and you realize that's not the answer, definitely not the answer for most of the population because they can't afford it. So I went back to my nutritional science roots and I said, well, maybe food's stronger, better than I think. And you start reading the research and you realize, wow, more plants, healthier body. And then I found out that Dr. Joel Fuhrman was just an hour from me. So I went and spent time with Joel. And I saw.
Where were you living at this time?
I was in Northeast Pennsylvania, little town called Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Yes.
Christmas town, yeah. So I spent time with Joel, and I saw people in their 70s and 80s getting better over time. And so it's a paradigm shift to recognize, wow, it's not too late for anybody to actually see their bodies get better when you offer your body the right opportunity to begin healing itself. And so shortly thereafter, we changed our family, and then I started writing prescriptions for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, handing that to my patients instead of prescriptions. And I saw miracles in my office, things I did not know were possible.
So how did people respond to those prescriptions?
Yeah, many of them were shocked, right? Like, you're not going to give me a pill. And but I think, they responded positively because one, I believed in it. I was doing it personally. And
So when did you make the switch for yourself?
yeah, shortly 2003, as we started
Wow.
diving into the reading and research, we're like, okay, I have to do this, right? It's just, there's no other option. When you see
Right.
the data, you're like, I have to do this for many reasons, right? And so I think because I had such belief in it and they felt my love for them, that I'm giving this to them because I really care. And I'm not giving them a prescription. I'm not trying to do something where I would make a profit. It actually is costing me time because I'm spending so much time with them to educate them. A lot of people embraced it, to varying degrees, but they were grateful for the information.
Wow. And what about your own personal experience with it? Had you had any health issues? And what
Yeah.
changes did you feel when you changed how you eat?
I think the changes that I felt, one was just energy. I was father of, back then, how many did we have? 3 children back then, and busy in a practice. And so you just accept a level of tiredness that's normal. And I noticed as I changed my diet that all of that fatigue went away. I never felt like I needed a nap on the weekend anymore. I woke up in the morning and I felt pretty good every day. Some low-level soreness from all my athletic stuff went away. My body recovered very quickly from different things. And so I had abounding energy that I didn't have before. And even though I didn't have any disease processes that I could see reversed, the energy was significant. And in our children, they had some, like most children, we had 3, so some ear infections, runny noses. My little son had dark circles under his eyes. And as soon as we cleaned up our diet, all of it went away.
So your wife was on board with this whole change?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we embraced it as a family.
That's amazing. Yeah. So did it take some convincing on your part, or was everybody pretty game?
Everybody and it's nice when you have young children. It's much easier.
Yeah.
Much easier with young children because you just put it on the table or in the pantry and that's all you have.
Right.
And so they all grew up extraordinarily healthy. The only doctor they ever had to see was me, but they needed antibiotics. They never had ear infections, never had strep throat, all the common illnesses. And now they recognize that looking back, they're like, wow, we weren't sick like all of our friends were.
Right. That's incredible. I mean, was it a process for you to decide to start feeding your kids plant-based food? Was that something you wrestled with at all, or were you clear on that from the start?
Yeah, I think I was clear, as we started to dive into the research. Once you really understand the power of plants, you think to yourself, well, why wouldn't I eat them? Why would I make a different choice? Right. And then beyond, and we'll get into more of this later, when you start looking at the supply chain of food, and then you start asking yourself questions like, why would I choose to exchange my hard-earned money and time for some of those other foods, animal products, ultra-processed foods that have a really negative suffering-based, lie-based, like all kinds of mess? Why would I want to exchange my money for those foods and feed those to my family?
Right, and support those corporations who don't care about me or other animals, or right. Anyone,
Right. So you don't have to dig too deep to start encountering that information when you start asking the right questions about why am I making choices about these foods to put on my plate.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So as a physician, you had connected with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. How did you feel in general, just in the world of medicine, now that you were this renegade plant-based guy.
Yeah, yeah, you start to feel very different from your colleagues. I was working in a large multi-specialty musculoskeletal group with orthopedic surgeons, anesthesiologists, and I was a team doctor at Lehigh and with the bobsled team, and I'm recommending plants for my patients. And I was, doing some other regenerative musculoskeletal injections like prolotherapy because I was getting all of their patients that failed traditional treatment. So now way outside the box all of a sudden, way beyond the line of normal medicine. And so my colleagues would, say I was practicing voodoo medicine. They're like, go see Dr. Stoll, he's doing voodoo medicine, or they would tease me that I'm eating twigs and berries and sticks. And they would joke like, boy, you're looking skinny. I'm like, well, no, I'm healthy, right? So you start to feel a bit like an outcast from the traditional medical system. And it is a little bit of a lonely road. Not as much today because I think there's a lot more healthcare providers that embrace this. But 20 years ago, it was tough.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And did you get any pushback? Did you get any, other than the jokes, did you get any real,
Yeah, I would have
counter?
doctors call me. I'm thinking of like endocrinologists and cardiologists that I was, I'm not changing any of their medications on their patients. I'm just talking to their patients that are seeing me for a musculoskeletal issue. And I'm talking to them about changing their diet and telling them how it's going to improve their bodies and that, about the studies. And so I would have doctors call me irate. Like, how dare you talk to my patients about their diet and infer that it can reverse their blood pressure or reverse their diabetes? That's impossible. That's not a malpractice. I mean, terrible things that you would get on the phone. And you try to have a conversation, but they were very close and believed what they believed, and we're not going to be open to any other, alternative view on nutrition and disease. So yeah, I mean, there were a lot of challenges.
That sounds really tough. Like, what did you attribute that defensiveness to? Because I would assume, you work with like a lot of smart, science-minded people. So I mean, I can only imagine that it must have been surprising and at the very least disappointing that people weren't more interested in this very helpful information, which is good news.
It is good. I know it's good news. It really is good news for people, and it's good news for patients. And I think, a lot of people in medicine, we have a tendency as doctors to really, because we are doctors and we understand, we've been taught a lot, we start to think that we know more about things than we actually know. So there's some hubris, certainly. And in specialties, there's a lot of there's protection around your specialty. They used to, in residency, they would always call it turf wars, where people get in arguments because, you've stepped across the line into somebody else's turf. And so I think I was encountering some of that, by just simply recommending that diet can improve something. They felt like I'd crossed over a line in their kingdom, and that I should not be making those kinds of recommendations or setting people up for failure because I'm telling them something that's not true. There's also an assumption that what they know to be true is true, even though they never stop to say, how do I know this is not true? Or to go back and look at the research and read it for themselves, or to ask even questions. I mean, the average medical school student gets 19 hours of nutrition in 4 years of medical school, which is less than 1% of the entire time of medical education is talked about diet. And it's nothing about what we're talking about today. I'm sure your listeners know more about nutrition than most medical school students that are graduating. And so it's, there's ignorance, there's hubris, there's turf wars. There's, kind of this protective thing that happens around patients where they're your patient. You become very paternalistic in medicine. And we don't think that we're actually just partnering with people to improve their lives, but we become paternalistic and protective when we shouldn't. So I think there's a lot of forces at work there. Fear is another one. And, even the deepest level of fear, like if what you're saying is right, then I may need to look at my own diet, and I don't want to do that.
Right. I think you probably just hit on one of the principal components of that pushback. Yeah, that makes total sense. So, I mean, where did you go from there? Here you are, a doctor, and you're in this world of conventional medicine. Did you have some existential crisis or like a rethinking of your whole professional path?
Yeah, I mean, you have to, right? Because what you're doing now, in many ways, the way that the system is set up is not designed to produce the outcome of really healthy people. One of the challenges in medicine today is reimbursement, that, we're paid for volume and procedures. That's the way that medicine is set up. So if you're not seeing, a minimum 4 people an hour, 5 is better, 6 is best, according to the administrators, then you're not producing enough financially for the system. But if you're actually trying to help somebody with their lifestyle, it takes time. And it's challenging, from that time financial system balance to do that. So, there was an existential crisis, certainly, of like, what am I actually doing as a doctor now, and how am I going to continue to practice, knowing what I know? And then there's also the financial challenge of, if I don't continue in this current model, like, how am I going to actually provide for my family stepping out?
Right.
It's quite difficult, but I kind of navigated all of that. Thankfully, I was in a field where I was doing a lot of musculoskeletal medicine. And so I was able, with, a PA, to kind of off-weight my schedule a little bit, to take more time with patients, and to weave in nutrition and lifestyle to every single visit. And it really became like a fairly good way to practice for quite a while.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. So you were able to find some balance within that framework for a while.
Yeah, there was definitely give and take.
Yeah.
And I definitely had a high, administrators stopping by saying your RVUs, your production value, is low, and you need to bring that up. And so you're getting constant pushback, despite patients getting better. Like, people were absolutely thrilled.
That's amazing. Well, just the idea of seeing 4 to 5 patients an hour, I mean, that's like 40 or 50 patients a day. That just, I can't even imagine, that level of human traffic, within. And also the fact that there are that many patients going to doctors all the time, that there's that steady stream. That's crazy to me too.
Oh, that's every day, all over.
Wow.
That volume is everywhere.
So when did you found the Plantrician Project, and what inspired that?
Yeah, so as I was going along, you start thinking like, okay, we need resources for patients. So my wife and I, then we produced a cookbook for patients. And then I thought, my patients really are asking for more information. So we did a 1-day immersion at DeSales University in 2009. So we had an entire day. We brought in vendors. I had Joel Furman come. We spoke. We did cooking classes and exercise classes and breakouts, just to teach them like what a healthy lifestyle is. It was very successful. At that immersion, I met a friend of mine, Tom Dunham, who later became a co-founder with me in the Plantrician Project. But I was introduced to Whole Foods, and I was served on the scientific advisory board at Whole Foods. And one of their initiatives coming out of that was to develop these total health immersions, where they send 100 of their most unhealthy employees to spend a week with us. And back then it was 4 other providers, to get to learn what it is to be healthy and why we make different food choices. So after one of our immersions, Tom was at my dinner table, and I said, Tom, it took me so many years to learn how to do this. As a clinician, I would really love to be able to provide like an immersion education experience for doctors. So we started a conference in 2013 with the help of our other partner, Susan Benegas, who's now the executive director at ACLM. And that was our first conference in Naples, Florida. We had 180 people that showed up, thankfully, because we didn't realize how expensive it is to run an event.
Oh, I
And
bet. Yeah, and
financial
Naples
risk we were
too.
taking,
Yeah.
it's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it was a huge risk. So we had a very successful event, and we wrapped it in a not-for-profit called the Plantrician Project. And so it started in 2013.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And what's what's the compliance tend to be like, for people after this immersion? Because I imagine people go to these things and get all fired up and all motivated, and then they return to their regular homes and the old habits kind of creep back in.
Yeah, that's right, Chrissy. And it really is, it speaks to a bigger problem that we have, which is culture. When you look at the root of problems, like when we start looking at somebody's diabetes and you say, why do they have insulin resistance? Well, it's, saturated fat, and it's ultra processed food and animal products and oils. Well, where does that come from? It's from an unhealthy diet. Well, why do we have an unhealthy diet? It's because of culture. So culture really is the root of the problem. That goes all the way back into 1800s. So it's this culture, right? They come for a week and they're in the culture a week of this beautiful immersive experience where they experience, a loving, supportive environment, beautiful food. They start to feel better. And then after a week, they go back out into this culture, which is designed to extract money from them by exploiting their reward systems and taking advantage of them and giving them unhealthy food choices. And it's very difficult. Or if they go home and, they have a divided home now, very difficult to do that. So that's where, the idea of community and support are so critical. It's you have to be able to have some kind of safety net of supportive culture and community in order to sustain a long-term change, because the culture is not working for you. When you
Right,
look
right.
at blue zones, you look at the blue zones and you think, oh, they have all these amazing lifestyle characteristics that let them lead long, healthy lives. But the most amazing characteristic is community. They're just born into a community where they don't have to think about, what am I going to eat? How am I going to be active? Am I a part of a supportive, loving community? When do I sleep? Stress. It's just, they're just born into it, and they just are. They grew up that way.
Right. Right. And yeah, right now everything's kind of headed in the opposite direction. Everything's so fragmented and disconnected and virtual.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's the culture piece, and then there's the problem of our own physiological tendencies. We evolved to respond very positively to these calorie dense foods that just didn't exist in nature. So when we were in danger of starving to death, that was a helpful evolutionary mechanism. But in modern times, when we've got calorie dense foods everywhere and to a level that was never existed in nature, yeah, it's kind of a deadly combination. So what ended up bringing you to Tennessee?
Yeah, so we were in Pennsylvania for 18 years, and grew the Plantrician Project, conferences and journals and all kinds of wonderful things. And just, we got to this place in Pennsylvania where we just felt like, it was time to move. Felt like God was maybe picking us up and moving us. And
Wow.
and we really felt like we were being dropped into Tennessee. We didn't know anything
Really?
here. I didn't have a job here. This was during COVID, in fact, in 2020. But it was just this a deep internal sense that we needed to move.
Really? And you both felt it, both you and
Yeah,
your wife?
and our children, and even, it's my oldest son and daughter-in-law were married, and so we had them up one weekend, and we were telling them that we felt like we're being called to make a move to Tennessee. And my daughter-in-law says, Dad, you don't understand. She said, a year ago, we felt like we were supposed to move to Tennessee, but we didn't want to tell you because we didn't want to make you think that you had to move with us or leave you behind.
That's amazing.
So,
That's so interesting. And why Tennessee? Had you ever been here before?
no, never been to Tennessee before. And never,
What?
yeah.
I mean,
The
do you
first
remember the
time,
moment when you started thinking about Tennessee?
yeah, it was May 1st, 2020. Exactly.
Really? What
Yeah.
what was happening?
We were actually sitting on the front porch talking to some friends of ours that were making a life change. And they were saying, we just don't know where we're supposed to go. They were living in New Jersey. And at that moment, I just felt like I was supposed to tell them that they needed to think about moving to Tennessee, Franklin, Tennessee. But as I
Franklin? Why
did it,
Franklin?
I just don't know. It's just there. It's that intuition. God was speaking to me. And as I was speaking it out, I just felt like it turned right back into me and felt like it was saying to me, their move is your move too.
So did those friends end up moving as well?
They
Oh,
did,
that's
and
amazing.
ironically, they rented a house about a mile from where we live. So yeah, I mean, we're
Really?
all parked here in Franklin, Tennessee together, trying to sort out like why are we here? My second son is very happy that we moved here because he found his wife here. So for him, this was
Wow.
the best move in the world. That was
Oh, that's beautiful. How old are your kids and how many do you have?
I have 6 children. My oldest is
Six.
26. My next one is 22, Gabe. I just got married. Then I have a 19-year-old son, Sammy. Joy is 18, and Elijah is 16, and my Faith is 12. So
Oh, wow. Wow, what a crew.
quite a crew, yes.
So how long did that process take from May 1st when you thought about Tennessee to when you actually made the move?
3.5 months. We
You
were
work
in
fast.
Tennessee in the middle of August. It just happened. Our house sold, for cash, and next thing you know, we were in a truck driving south. But thrilled
Boy.
to love Tennessee.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I mean, I mean, different in many ways, but in 2017, I had come to Nashville for a music festival. And then I got back to New York City where I was living at the time.
Hmm.
And it was just very strange. Nashville just stuck in my head.
Yeah.
And a part of me just kind of stayed here until I, cobbled together a 3-month trial move in
Wow.
February of 2017. And
And
then
3 months is now 7 years.
3 months is now 7+ years. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what did you do when you got here?
It's like we moved during COVID, so it was
Yeah.
crazy, right. So yeah, we moved in, and then you're trying to sort out so many different things. Like, we're here, what do we do now, and how does this work? And still dealing with COVID challenges. And for our not-for-profit, it was very challenging because we couldn't host conferences or events and
Right.
donation. I mean, there's lots of like things in the mix. So the first couple of years here were very challenging. I started doing some work at a little clinic, which I love, which is it's regenerative musculoskeletal medicine. So doing regenerative injections and lifestyle medicine to help people restore function and alleviate pain and find new health again at Maxwell Health. So I do that. Plantrician Project grew, and we expanded conferences and are doing things globally. And we just signed an agreement to work to start a Plantrician Japan with an annual conference in Kyoto, new
Wow.
conference in Bangkok, UAE. So lots of things have grown. Um, yeah, and it's just like it's just growing out of like, I feel like we got planted in the soil in Tennessee, right? And there's germination, and now I feel like we're just sprouting and just trying to figure out like, okay, here we are, and we know we're supposed to be here. And
Right.
one other fun thing that I started that I love, and I invite any of the listeners that are in Nashville to join us too. At the conference last year, I really have had this sense talking about community, that's one of the missing links for people and for doctors that are trying to help patients, is to send them back out and let them get connected into a supportive community. So I suggested last year at the conference that everybody in the audience should start a potluck in their area. It's just such a simple way to start building community. And so I knew that I had to start one. So a woman that was in the conference that year, Lou Comfort, came and said, I'll help you start a potluck. So we did start a little potluck that we meet once a month. We're meeting at the Green Room in downtown Franklin. And it's just a beautiful community of people that are growing. And, it's a great place for patients. I send them, say, just come and have dinner with us. You don't even have to bring anything. Just bring your appetite and a smile if you don't know what to bring.
Right,
But
right. No, I first met you at one of your potlucks back when it was at the
yeah,
clinic. And yeah,
Yes.
it was so much fun. The food was amazing. The conversation was definitely dynamic. It was very, very interesting. I think it got a little heated at times, but it was really fun. So you're someone who doesn't just talk the talk, you're really walking the walk in terms of, pushing your own limits and expanding your, boundaries literally and geographically. Um, how do you find the vegan community here in Tennessee as compared to in Pennsylvania?
There is a community here. It was very small in Pennsylvania. For a long time, it was just a couple of us doctors. Then, we started to get some. I was always trying to do talks in the area, Saturday events. I started doing work with the Rodale Institute and doing some lectures and conferences out there, and which is interesting. I want to come back to that in just a minute. But we started to grow more of a community because I was actively trying to connect with people and talk to people, and anybody that would listen, I would talk to them, my patients, and so there was a community that grew over time. But what I found coming here is there's already a nice, robust community of people that I'm very excited about, and I look forward to finding more of those people in the area.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a pleasant surprise for me moving here from New York City because New York City obviously has a lot of vegan stuff going on. And when I moved to Tennessee, I just remember thinking, I'm not sure what the what the lay of the land is going to be from a vegan perspective. And I remember that first morning, my brother in New York City had driven out here with me, and he's a vegan as well. And so the following morning, we woke up and we thought, well, let's try to find, a vegan breakfast somewhere in Nashville if it's possible, shot in the dark. And we just Googled vegan brunch Nashville. And lo and behold, there's a vegan restaurant less than half a mile from where I lived. And I just remember thinking, oh, this could be good. This could be better than I anticipated. And since then, I've expanded and connected with you and, some other people and not, in the extended Nashville area, in Franklin and outside of the big cities in rural Tennessee. So it's really been cool. So what are you working on now, and what's next for you? I guess it sounds like the Plantrician Project is keeping you very busy.
Yeah, the Plantrician Project is really growing. And, we started that because, one, I just wanted to help educate healthcare professionals because I believe it's so important. They don't get any of that education in their medical school education. Like I mentioned, less than 1% of the time is spent on nutrition, and none of that is the nutrition of health. So I wanted to educate them because I also realized that doctors are so incredibly influential in their patients' lives. Each healthcare provider sees 15,000 people in their career. So when you change one healthcare provider, you're impacting first degree 15,000 plus all the connections to those 15,000 people. So it has a rapid exponential impact. Two, I just realized how influential doctors are. I'll do a week-long immersion, teach people all week, about the science of nutrition. They go back to their doctor, their family doctor they've seen for 20 years, and their doctor will just make one comment like, I don't know if that's very safe. I wouldn't recommend that vegan diet. And in 30 seconds, undermines an entire week of science that I just presented because the doctor has respect and influence in people's lives.
Yeah. I remember thinking, similar thought. One day I was watching the Joe Rogan's show, and somebody mentioned the China study, and he said something like, which, as you of course know, is the most comprehensive nutritional study that's, ever been conducted. And Joe Rogan said, oh, the China study, wasn't that debunked? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was debunked. He had his assistant check, yeah, it was debunked. And in one fell swoop, the most comprehensive nutritional study of, it's just
peer-reviewed science, right? And Joe Rogan, comment just
so painful. So how do you build interest among doctors? Because I would imagine that a lot of doctors, I mean, this is a big change for them to even contemplate. So how is it talking them into, participating in this educational experience?
Yeah, it's challenging, and when I started, I really made a commitment. I said, I need to reach people that have never heard the message. And so I'm going to spend time going to hospitals, medical schools, and doing grand rounds and talking to doctors. And so that's what I did. And it's not easy, especially early on. You go to do a grand rounds at a hospital, and there's a lot of people with their arms folded because you're talking about nutrition and disease reversal. And that is like,
And there's a McDonald's in the lobby,
Oh, yeah, people with IV poles standing to get their Big Mac, right? It's crazy. So it was not easy, but I learned through the years that telling stories is a way to bypass the head and get to the heart and open up their mind for something new. So in my presentations, I would just tell stories. I tell stories about Marcy Madrid, who's a vice president of population health in Midland that I met in November of 2015 when she had progressive MS, almost on disability, failed all the medications, changed her diet. 6 months later, MRIs show complete reversal of all of her lesions, and she's been in remission ever since. So you present something like that with MRI findings, and all of a sudden you've piqued their interest, and now the science that follows, they're at least open to maybe considering that this is a possibility. Mm-hmm. So I started telling stories, presenting the science, and over the years now they're much more open to that. I think that they've heard enough about plant-based nutrition, and nutrition has become more widespread in healthcare, and so they're much more open to think about it at least.
Right. And would you say that information about MS is becoming more widespread? Because I still don't hear people talk about it. And I remember MS, like when I first heard about it as a kid, there was a walkathon at the elementary school where I was going, to raise money for multiple sclerosis. And so that's when I first learned about it. And it just sounded awful. It sounded like such a scary, horrible, death sentence. And so then as an adult, when I started learning about nutrition, and when I came across, I believe was it Dr. Roy Swank? Was he the one?
Yes, Roy Swank.
Who did the study? Yeah. I just remember thinking, oh my goodness, the fact that there's, an actual effective treatment for MS, that's incredible. And yet I almost never hear about it. And that's astounding to me, because MS is such a horribly debilitating disease. So how is it that information is not getting more well known? Or is it?
No, I think you're right. It's not as well known. I think that there's a couple of things that work against it. We don't have a lot of large randomized control trials. There's some conflicting evidence in trials that have been done. Part of it, I think, is the way that the trials were constructed. The disease itself is not as easy as reversing type 2 diabetes, because if you've had it for a long time, you have scarring. And some scarring creates permanent issues. There's, it's not only nutrition, there's some stress components, some environmental components. So has to be an intensive lifestyle intervention. And if people do only a little bit, they don't see a lot of change. If they do moderate amount, they see a little bit of change. And so it's not a disease where, you can, like diabetes, type 2 diabetes is pretty easy. A couple of little changes and their blood sugars get better right away. MS takes a lot more effort to do that. And so I think it's just a more complicated disease. Like cancer, it's much more complicated. And certainly nutrition is an important part of that, but it's not the only component.
Right. So are the doctors getting on board with this? And do you see a lot of them changing their own diets?
Yeah, more and more. When every year at the conference, and we averaged, 8 to 1,200 healthcare providers from 30 countries that come to our one conference in California every year. And every year I ask how many of you are new, and it's 75%, which is great. Because we never want to preach to the choir. We always want to reach new healthcare providers, new people. So every year we're seeing new people come through. And the next generation of people in training are very open, very interested. And so we created a free platform called Plantrician University for students, from coaching students to physicians. It's free, as well as faculty members. And so they can just go on Plantrician University, they can sign up, and we have monthly courses that we add. We have all of our lectures from the conferences. We're going to do a mentoring platform. And it's just a way to help invest in that next generation that I really believe will be the generation that starts to usher in lifestyle medicine.
That's amazing. And so I guess the only thing that keeps coming to mind for me is, we've still got this structure of our healthcare system where the pharmaceutical companies and the health insurance companies have, just different incentives. So they're not incentivized by people getting healthy and getting off the drugs. So how do you see those two factors, affecting this progression?
Yeah, it's really, you're right. It's my grandfather used to tell me, Scotty, just remember, it's always about the money. When they tell you it's not about the money, it's still about the money. So,
Right.
they're very influential, very powerful. They, the food industry, pharmaceutical industry, they have a great influence over education, guidelines, all kinds of things that drive clinical care. Right now, the cost of healthcare is becoming, it's reaching a point where it's not sustainable. And so, as a country, we have to do something, because otherwise that'll, further bankrupt our country. And the only way that we're going to see the difference is instituting some level of lifestyle medicine and reimbursing doctors for lifestyle medicine outcomes. It's already been talked about at Congress, so those winds are already starting to blow. It's not going to happen soon. I think the system will have to get to a worse state than it currently is in before we start to see that. But I think that the idea of quality care over quantity care is coming. I talk to CEOs of hospitals, they know it's coming. They're not ready to jump ship yet. They know it's coming, but they're still so heavily invested and financially rewarded by the current system, they can't make that switch.
Right.
So that's why we do grassroots, because that's we could spend so much time and money at the top and not see the degree of change that we will see by reaching individual doctors and healthcare systems that are open and working with them to begin changing patients' lives now, and waiting for some of those top-down changes that are necessary, like you're saying, to really see a bigger impact.
Right. And that is what I love so much about just this whole message, is that, yes, the government, the big money folks, all the power players, they can make their decisions and do what they want, and they will, they'll do what they want. But the good news is that we don't have to wait on them to do anything, because we can just change how we eat right now. And so that's what I love, is that, like you said, it's all about, just here in the moment, the grassroots level, the community level. And, like you're doing with the potlucks, just getting people coming together, eating delicious, whole food, plant-based food is, end of story. They don't even need to hear about the research or the studies. So that seems brilliant to me.
It's wonderful. Our last potluck, we had some people brought their neighbors to the green room. Neighbors had no idea, right? They knew what they ate, but they had kind of joked that this, vegan diet, they came and they tasted the delicious food that we all brought. We talked about it. I did a little lecture. And when we left, the husband, who's an engineer, and the wife stopped and said, we're changing our diet because of tonight.
Wow. That's a win.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's incredible when you think about the far-reaching impact of that. It's not just beneficial for them physically, but the 100 bites they take every day a piece, the 2,000 pounds of food they eat in a year, has a huge impact, on animal welfare, on environmental resources, on how they begin speaking about those things to people around them. This huge expansive impact of just one person making a different choice about the food they put on their plate is what's truly exciting.
Right, right. And I just find that so impressive that, as a medical doctor trained within the system with all of that professional status in that world that, the rest of us, so many people put on a pedestal and just view as kind of a different, sector of humanity, that you just came to the conclusion that, oh, the real way to help in addition to that is within the community and building community and organizing potlucks and talking to people. I mean, I just admire that so much. I mean, it's so outside the box and to me seems so atypical for a lot of doctors.
I know, I always laugh, like, there's all these sexy topics, epigenetics, angiogenesis, all this
Yeah.
interesting stuff. And I'm talking about potlucks, like,
Yeah, but
but it's beautiful and important too. I love the science and the biochemistry and cellular physiology, but potlucks are really important,
yeah, yeah, and they're so fun, because you can kind of take your show on the road and, try a new dish, try making a new dish, try eating a new dish. Yeah, talk to other funny people. So what's the best way for people in the Nashville area to, find out about these potlucks and participate?
Yeah, we have an app. I just have to look it up. It's Hobnob. I'm just gonna on our, gotta look that up now. And plant-based meetup potluck style. And you can just go on this app, Hobnob. You can reach us and join us. Just say your
Hobnob?
knob. Yep, I'll show you the app here. Uh, yeah, it's just a beautiful little HOBNOB.
Perfect. Okay.
Free, and then you can look up just the plant-based potluck meetup. We'd love for you to
Okay.
join us. And then I'll challenge all your listeners too. If you haven't started a potluck in your area, join us. Keep it super simple. This free
Yeah.
little app is a great way to connect. Don't over organize it. Just tell people to bring something. If they don't know what to bring, just bring a smile and an appetite. And
Right.
just an inviting, warm atmosphere for people. And then it becomes sustainable. If we try to over organize and say, these people need to bring salads, and it just becomes too difficult.
Right. Right.
Keep it
Right. Right.
simple and enjoy the connection, right? It's all about connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what if there's like an extra dessert? That's okay.
And hey, that's good.
That's great. Yeah, that's the
Right?
best possible, case
And the
scenario.
food's
Yeah.
always delicious, right? If we have
Right.
only dishes, that's perfect. It's okay. We don't have to have it
Right. Right.
organized.
Right. Well, thank you so much for, sharing all this information and just all these great stories with us. Welcome to Tennessee. I haven't been here that long, but I've been here longer than you, so I'll
Thank
extend an
you.
official welcome. And again, just thanks for everything that you're doing for animals, for human health. And the final question I have for you, which I like to pose to all my guests, is there a single word that for you sums up what being vegan is all about?
Connection. It's all connected.
Mm,
Everything we do, believe, it's all connected. And in our society, it's all about disconnection. Disconnection from our food choices and what's suffering, what's being used up. Disconnection from love, connection with people. So the more that we can find ways to connect with everything in our world and with others, the more beautiful it gets.
perfect. Yeah. Yeah. That makes total sense to me. All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. And we close every episode of the Vegan Posse by taking 30 seconds of silence for all of the suffering animals, human and non-human, who desire, as we all do, safety, happiness, and the freedom to live out their lives without interference. So, Dr. Stoll, I invite you to join me in 30 seconds of silence for the animals, and we'll conclude with the sound of the bell. Thank you, Dr. Stoll, and thank you, Posse. See you next time.
Thank you,
Until
Chrissy.
then, stay strong and stay true.